His lips were already pressed against my neck when I breathed those words. "Keep going." The phrase slipped out before I could hold it back. His strong arms rested on both sides of me, the cool leather seat beneath my legs, steam covering every inch of the car windows. His warm breath tickled my skin. My knees touched the center console as he moved closer to me. We had parked the car on an empty street just outside our small town, right under a dim orange streetlight that barely lit up the foggy night. The engine was silent. Everything seemed louder in that stillness. The gentle touch of skin, the sound of my breathing getting faster, the soft noise of my shirt as he lifted it higher. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his voice deep and soft, his face touching mine. I couldn't answer right away because honestly, I wasn't all right, but I wanted him desperately anyway. He was already so close to me and I still asked for more. His hands held me tighter. I pressed my teeth into my bottom lip. My body curved against the car seat. This wasn't the place a woman like me should have been, not with someone like him. Not with a young man I used to watch shooting hoops in my backyard, who always called me Mrs. Carter with a polite smile and muddy clothes. But sometime over the past 3 years, he had grown into a real man, and I had started feeling invisible. Until this evening, until this moment, I never thought I would cross such a dangerous line. I always believed I was strong enough to resist feelings like this. I was completely wrong. My name is Alina Carter. I'm 42 years old, been married for 18 years, have 1 child, a son studying at college. I work selling houses in a tiny town where rumors spread faster than facts. People recognize my name before they see my face, but nobody truly notices me anymore. Nobody except him. Nobody like Adam. He's 23 years old. He was my son's best friend throughout high school. He slept over at our home more nights than I can remember. He helped us paint our back fence one hot summer. He ate breakfast in our kitchen with messy hair and no embarrassment. When he returned home after finishing college and started working with his father doing yard work, I didn't think it was important. Just another boy who became a man too quickly. Another familiar face around town. Until I realized he was staring at me, not like a child, not like a family friend, looking at me like he could tell I hadn't been touched by anyone in many months. I understand what this situation makes me look like. I know exactly what people would whisper about me, but here's the truth they could never understand. He didn't try to trick me into this. He didn't chase after me. He simply looked at me like I was still someone worth desiring. And after so many years of feeling like background decoration, like something that just disappeared into the walls, I began to believe what I saw in his eyes. We didn't jump into this situation overnight. It started with tiny moments, quiet signals. A glance that lasted too long in the kitchen when I offered him some coffee. His fingers brushing against mine when I gave him the gardening gloves. The way he stayed around after cutting the grass, asking about my day like my answer actually mattered to him. And the way my voice sounded different when I responded. What would you do if the man who made you feel truly alive again was young enough to be your son's close friend? That night in his car wasn't an accident. It was a moment I chose to let happen, and I can never take it back. I felt his body weight above me, his breathing becoming unsteady when I pulled him even closer. I saw the brief moment of doubt in his eyes, and then the flash of pure hunger right after it. I felt how desperately he wanted me, how scared he was that I might change my mind, how firmly he gripped my arm like he couldn't trust this feeling to last. I kissed him more passionately because if this was going to destroy everything in my life, I didn't want it to be gentle and quiet. I wanted to remember every sensation, the pressure, the shaking, the feeling of something I didn't think I could handle and still whispered, "Don't stop." I have no idea what comes next, but I know I'm not the same woman who drove home an hour later, parked the car, and snuck up the stairs like nothing had changed. Because something enormous had changed, and I allowed it to happen. Before we continue with this story, please hit the like button and subscribe. These types of stories aren't meant for everyone, but if you've stayed with me this far, you understand why they matter. The more you watch these videos completely, the more the platform shows them to other people who feel the same way. And that means I can bring you more stories like this one. Let's keep going with the story. There's this specific moment that most people never pay attention to, when your own name stops feeling like it belongs to you, when someone says it, and it doesn't wake up any feelings inside you anymore. This happened to me around the 13th year of my marriage. Maybe it was year 11, if I'm being completely honest. My husband Brian would say, Elena, like it was just another item on his daily list. Something he had to do, not the name of a woman, not a real person with a body and a voice that once made him walk across a room to reach me. And I said his name less and less often, not because I was angry, just because something was slowly wearing away. That's what happens, I believe. Not huge betrayals or dramatic fights, just slow, steady damage over time. My house was always perfectly clean. I enjoyed keeping it that way. The kitchen counters wiped spotless before I went to sleep each night. Mail organized into neat labeled containers. A vase of artificial flowers because real ones always died too quickly. Brian loved having everything in order, and so did I. It made our daily life feel like something we could control. But sometimes I would sit on the edge of our bed after taking a shower, wrapped in that thin towel that never quite covered my legs completely, and I would wonder if anyone had truly looked at me, really seen me, in the past 5 years. My bathroom mirror certainly looked at me, but harshly and without kindness. But that's not the kind of seeing I'm talking about. Adam returned to our town after finishing college and started working part-time for his father's landscaping company, a job he already knew well from working summers in the past. He would drive up in their old white pickup truck with mud covering the tires and grass stains on his work clothes. The first time he knocked on our front door again, I hadn't seen him in over a year. He was much taller now, with broader shoulders. His voice had gotten deeper, but more than that, he carried himself differently, like life had hit him hard once or twice, and he wasn't pretending it hadn't happened. He smiled the same way he used to, but the boy who used to smile like that was completely gone. "I wasn't sure you would remember me," he said when I opened the door. "You're impossible to forget," I answered before I could stop the words from coming out. And then I did that embarrassing thing that older women do, laugh too quickly and act like it was just friendly conversation. But it wasn't just friendly, because something deep inside me jumped when his eyes didn't look away from mine. He started doing regular yard work for us again, offered to trim our bushes, clean out the gutters, repaint the window frames. He said he owed us for all the kindness we'd shown him over the years. I didn't argue with him about it. It felt wonderful to have some life and activity outside the house again. Not exactly company, just movement and energy. Sometimes I would make fresh lemonade and carry it outside to him. Sometimes coffee, sometimes I brought nothing at all. But we began talking again, really talking. Small conversations about everyday things. His mother's health problems, my son's college major, how much our town had changed over the years. He would sit on our porch steps with sweat covering his forehead, and I would stand in the doorway much longer than I should have, just listening to his voice. One evening, after Brian had gone to bed early, I found myself sitting alone in our living room watching television. The light from the screen flickered across the walls in soft blue and gray colors. I heard someone knocking on the back door, not the front entrance, but the door that leads from our kitchen. It was Adam. He explained that he had forgotten his sweatshirt somewhere in our house. I let him inside even though I knew I probably shouldn't have. He walked barefoot across our kitchen tiles, looked even taller in the dim lighting, and mentioned that he remembered how much I had always liked the lemon-scented soap we kept in the guest bathroom. I laughed again too quickly and told him he had an excellent memory for details. And he said, for certain important things, yes. His voice didn't sound cocky or proud. It sounded aware and thoughtful, and I hated how warm my chest felt when he said it. I started staying awake later at night, not waiting for him specifically, just not being able to sleep. The silence in our house became much heavier and more noticeable. Every small sound the floorboards made carried some kind of expectation. Every light I left on felt like a silent maybe. Sometimes I caught myself putting on lip balm again before bringing him something to drink, smoothing down my hair before stepping outside to see him. That's when I realized something fundamental had already shifted and changed. Not between the two of us necessarily, but inside me personally. He began sending text messages about things that had nothing to do with yard work. Funny pictures, news headlines, small random thoughts. Then one night, while I was folding clean laundry, I received a message that made me stop everything. Adam wrote, "Do you ever feel like nobody really sees you anymore, like you're invisible?" I stared at those words for 10 full minutes before I could respond. Then I wrote back, "Yes, every single day of my life." After that conversation, he started calling me Alina, not Mrs. Carter anymore, not ma'am. Just Alina, like I was a real person with my own identity. There's a particular kind of attention that isn't loud or obviously inappropriate, just completely focused and impossible to ignore. And receiving that attention made the silence in my house feel much louder and more empty. The humming of our refrigerator, the dripping faucet, the echo my bare feet made when I walked down our hallway. He filled that empty space with something I hadn't even realized I was desperately starving for: recognition, being truly seen and acknowledged. I started having dreams again, not necessarily about him specifically, but about being touched by someone, about hands on my lower back, about warm breath near my neck, about being the person someone reached for first, not because they had to, but because they were hungry for me. It frightened me how quickly those dreams started feeling like memories of things that hadn't happened yet. And still, I allowed those thoughts to keep coming. It wasn't exactly flirting, at least not in the obvious way you might recognize from across a room and gossip about later. It was much quieter than that, slower and more patient, like steam slowly rising from a cup of coffee that's just been poured. You don't notice the steam until it completely fogs up the glass you're looking through. That's what Adam became for me. A slow, quiet fog that I pretended wasn't there, even while I was breathing him in deeper and deeper. It began with our morning conversations. He started showing up a little bit earlier each day. He claimed it was to avoid working in the hot afternoon sun. Maybe that was actually true, but I started making coffee for 2 people instead of just 1. I would hand him his mug while he was still pulling on his work gloves, fingers already covered in soil from other jobs, and we would stand together in our garage with the door halfway open to let in the gray morning light. He would lean against the wall casually. I would sit on our old cooler, and we would talk about everything. God, we really talked about music we both liked, about his younger brother, about the old job I used to have before I got married and never went back to. These were things Brian hadn't asked me about in many years. And the way Adam listened to my answers, not just out of politeness, but with real curiosity and interest, It slowly chipped away at something that had become hard and cold inside me over time. Then came our first actual physical touch. Nothing scandalous or dramatic, just a brief moment in the hallway near our mudroom when he brushed past me and his fingers barely grazed the small of my back. A flash of contact, nothing more than that. But I froze completely in place because my skin lit up like it had been starved for oxygen for years. He didn't apologize for the contact, didn't even mention that it had happened, just continued walking past me like it was perfectly normal. And I stood there for what felt like several minutes, breathing too shallow and fast. My heart pounding like I had been caught doing something forbidden. A few days later, the same thing happened again. This time it was in our kitchen. He had brought over a tray full of small plants. He thought I might enjoy repotting them together before the fall weather arrived. We were standing side by side, both of our hands covered in potting soil, the counter a complete mess of roots and ceramic pieces. He passed me a small gardening tool, and our fingers touched much longer than was necessary for the exchange. I didn't pull my hand away from his. Neither did he move his away from mine. When I looked up at his face, he was already looking directly at me. And for the first time since this all began, he didn't look down or away when our eyes met. That same night, I sat alone in my bedroom with my legs folded under me, holding a book I wasn't actually reading. The window was cracked open slightly. The evening air smelled like fresh grass and the approaching darkness. And I couldn't stop thinking about how close he had been standing to me. The warmth that came from his arm, the softness in his voice when he asked if I liked having ferns in the house. Who in the world gets turned on by a conversation about ferns? I actually laughed out loud at myself for thinking that, then stopped laughing immediately because the honest answer was me. I was the one getting excited about ferns. Everything between us escalated while staying completely silent. Longer eye contact, more excuses to be alone in the same room together. He started sending text messages late at night, always after 10 o'clock. Always something that seemed harmless if anyone else read it. Adam would write, "You seemed quiet today." I would respond, "I was just tired from work." Then Adam would write, "Or maybe you're just saving your words for the right person to hear them." I didn't respond to that message for 30 full minutes. Then finally I wrote back, "Maybe I am." He didn't send another message after that. He didn't need to send one. One afternoon I found him in our garage again. It had just finished raining heavily. The smell of wet pavement mixed with gasoline filled the air around us. He was working on fixing our lawn mower, sleeves rolled up to show his arms marked with smudges of black grease. "You always know how to fix things," I said to him. "Not always," he answered without looking up from his work. "Sometimes I make them much worse than they were before." When he glanced over at me, I saw something new in his eyes, something unspoken and hungry and dangerous. He stood up slowly, wiped his hands clean on an old towel, and said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," I said, suddenly very aware of my own heartbeat. "Do you ever feel like you completely missed something important?" he asked me. "Like the one thing that makes people feel truly alive?" I didn't answer him right away. I couldn't answer because, yes, I felt that way every single day of my life. So I just looked back at him and he looked back at me. Neither of us blinked or looked away. That was the exact moment, the breath before a kiss moment. But we didn't move toward each other, didn't touch at all. We just stood there under the flickering garage light above both of us, pretending we hadn't just crossed some invisible line that changed everything. Later that same night, I sat in our dark living room, watching nothing on the television, holding a glass of wine in my hands. I wasn't actually drinking the wine. The porch light was still on outside. The guest room door was closed. Adam wasn't staying over at our house, but somehow it still felt like that room belonged to him now. And in that heavy quiet, my phone buzzed with a new message. Adam had written, "I keep thinking about your hands." I stared at those words until my phone screen went dim and dark. Then I started typing, "I keep thinking about your eyes." But I deleted that. Then I typed, "I think I should stop this before it goes too far." But I deleted that too. Then I typed, "I feel the same way." And I actually sent that message. And after I sent it, I didn't sleep for even 1 minute that entire night. By the end of that week, it didn't matter whether we were alone in the same room together or just somewhere near each other. Everything felt electrically charged and dangerous. In our hallway, we would pass each other like strangers in a spy movie, too aware of each other, too careful with our movements. He would say, "Good evening," and nod his head slightly. I would nod back, gripping whatever I was carrying much too tightly. But the heat between us was definitely there, growing stronger, demanding attention, waiting for something to happen. It was the night Brian drove out of town for a weekend trip. He had gone to Charleston for some kind of reunion, one of those alumni events that sounded more like an excuse for middle-aged men to drink too much and talk about the past with other men who didn't know how to say, "I miss you," without clinking their glasses together first. He kissed me goodbye in our driveway, told me he would be back on Sunday evening, and I waved and smiled and wished him a safe trip. But the exact moment his car's taillights disappeared down our street, I let out a long breath in a way that scared me. It wasn't relief exactly, and it wasn't anticipation exactly, just a kind of release. Like something inside me had finally stopped pretending to be something it wasn't. It rained that night. A slow, steady drizzle that never turned into a real storm, just lingered in the air like breath on skin. Adam sent me a text message around 9 o'clock. He wrote, "Garage is flooding. Do you mind if I come check the gutters?" It was obviously a ridiculous excuse. We both knew it was ridiculous. Still, I wrote back, "Keys are under the ceramic frog statue. You know which one." I heard our back door opening a few minutes later. I didn't get up to greet him. He didn't call out to let me know he was there. The house felt completely still, television turned off. Lights dimmed low, everything quiet except for the steady tick of our kitchen clock and the sound of rain tapping against glass windows. When I finally stood up from the couch, I didn't even realize I had taken off my sweater at some point. I was wearing just a tank top and pajama pants, my feet bare, my breathing shallow and fast. I walked toward our laundry room. He was standing there completely soaked from the rain. His shirt was clinging to his chest, his hair matted down and wet, his hands still gripping the edge of our dryer like he was trying to physically hold himself back from doing something. He didn't speak when he saw me. Neither did I say anything. I just walked past him, deliberately brushing against his arm, feeling the heat under his soaked fabric, and opened the cabinet to get him a clean towel. My hands were trembling. "You're completely soaked," I said quietly. "So are you," he said back to me, even though I wasn't wet at all. I turned around to face him, and there it was, that silence we had been dancing around for weeks and weeks. He stepped forward very slowly, one careful foot at a time, like he didn't trust himself to move too quickly. His hand hovered in the air just beside my face. "I don't know if this is right," he started to say. But I leaned forward into his almost touch, and that was the last moment either of us hesitated about anything. His lips were warm and desperate, soft at first, like he was afraid I would disappear if he pressed too hard against me. But I didn't disappear. I moved closer to him. My fingers grabbed the soaked collar of his shirt, pulling him toward me until my back was pressed against our dryer. His body pressed against mine, cold from the rain, hard from months of physical work, trembling like he was trying to hold something powerful inside himself. My legs started shaking. He kissed my neck, my collarbone, the edge of my jaw. I heard myself whisper his name, a sound so quiet I don't think I meant for it to actually come out of my mouth. When his hands found my waist, I didn't try to stop him, not even when they slid underneath my tank top. Not even when I felt his skin against my skin and my heart started pounding so hard I thought I might actually faint. "Wait," he whispered suddenly. He pulled back just enough to look directly into my eyes. "We don't have to do this. I don't want you to feel like you have to." But I grabbed his face in both of my hands and said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." It was a lie and a truth and something in between both. His forehead rested against mine for one heartbeat, and then we kept going. Everything else happened in the dim light of our laundry room. His shirt peeled off, heavy and damp. My tank top lifted over my head. I raised my arms without any shame, without asking permission, just breathing and warmth and skin. When he pressed into me, I gasped out loud, not from pain, but from complete shock. At how real this was, at how much of him there was, at how much of me had been waiting for exactly this feeling without ever admitting it to myself. He paused immediately. "Are you okay?" he whispered against my ear. I nodded, but barely. When he moved deeper inside me, I dug my fingernails into his back. I couldn't help myself. I wasn't ready for him, not really. Not for this, not for how it would feel, but I took all of him anyway. Our rhythm was slow and careful, like we were both afraid of waking up the entire house. His hands pressed against the dryer behind me for support. Mine clutched his forearms, then his hair, then the edge of his belt that was still hanging loose. Every single movement felt like a confession of something. Every breath we took was too loud in the quiet room. Every kiss tasted like guilt wrapped up in heaven. When it was over, we stayed perfectly still. His head rested against my shoulder. Our bodies still tangled together, my chest rising and falling too fast, his warm breath on my neck. I wanted to say something, but the silence felt heavier than any words could be. He pulled away from me first, carefully, like I might break into pieces. I watched him gather up his shirt, his keys, his courage. He didn't look at me when he opened our back door to leave, but just before he stepped outside into the rain, he said, "I won't pretend this never happened." And then he was gone, leaving me standing there in the glow of our laundry room light, wet and shaking and completely changed forever. I never imagined I would cross a line like this. I didn't plan to want him the way I did, but I wanted him desperately. And that desire ruined everything I thought I knew about myself. What would you do if the man who made you feel alive again was young enough to be your son's close friend? Because that's exactly what Adam was to me. And now he wasn't just living in my thoughts and dreams. He was inside me in ways I could never take back or undo. The next morning, I made pancakes like absolutely nothing had happened. Flipped them on our griddle, set the table for just one person, turned the radio on low volume. The chair across from me stayed completely empty. It wasn't supposed to feel like this, like someone had rearranged every piece of furniture in the room without actually touching anything. I didn't eat the pancakes. I just sat there with my hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Watching syrup drip slowly down the stack, I couldn't bring myself to cut into. My phone lit up once with a new message. Adam had written, "Are you okay?" I stared at those words without responding. Was I okay? What kind of person even asks that question after what we had done together? And then I realized he wasn't asking to make himself feel better about what happened. He was asking because he genuinely cared about me, and somehow that made everything feel worse. The next few days moved like thick, wet concrete. I would pass mirrors around our house and catch sight of my own eyes like I was looking at a complete stranger. someone with messy hair and bruises she couldn't explain easily. Every time I walked past our laundry room, I felt it all again, the pressure of his weight on top of me, the sound of his breathing, the way I whispered his name like I had been meaning to say it for years. I hadn't even used our dryer since that night. I didn't want to touch it, because touching it felt like touching him again. Adam didn't come to our house for 2 whole days. That was the agreement neither of us had actually made out loud. But on the 3rd night, I heard our garage door creaking around 10:45. He didn't knock on any door, didn't send a text message. He just waited outside in that stupid hoodie he always wore, hands buried deep in his pockets like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to exist in my world anymore. I opened the door without being asked. I didn't invite him inside. I didn't tell him to leave either. We just stood there like teenagers who had learned too much too quickly. He was the first one to speak. "Is it wrong that I don't regret what happened?" His voice cracked halfway through the question. I looked at him, and all I could manage to say was, "Don't say that out loud." Not because I disagreed with him, but because hearing those words spoken made everything feel too real to handle. We sat down on our porch steps side by side, our legs barely touching, no light except the flickering porch bulb and the yellow glow from our neighbor's window across the street. He smelled like sawdust and citrus soap. I hated that I noticed those details. "I thought about texting you," he said quietly, "but I figured you probably didn't want to see my name on your phone." I let out a long breath. "I didn't want to see it," I admitted, "but I still stared at my screen for an hour after your message came in." He looked down at his hands. "You're married," he said. The words weren't angry or accusing, just stating a fact, like he needed to hear it said out loud again. "So are you," I replied without thinking first. He blinked in surprise. I regretted saying it immediately. "I didn't mean that the way it sounded." "No, you did mean it," he said. "And it doesn't change the fact that this happened between us." I nodded, still staring at the same patch of grass at the edge of our sidewalk. "I don't know what to do with these feelings," I whispered. His hand brushed against mine then, slow and hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to comfort me for something we had both caused together. I didn't pull my hand away from his. I should have, but I didn't. The next few days were actually worse than the first ones. Not because of what had happened that night on our porch steps, but because of what didn't happen. We didn't talk again, didn't text each other, didn't even look at each other the next time he was at our house, helping Brian load folding chairs into his truck. I watched them from our upstairs window. Adam looked taller somehow, older, like someone carrying a secret that had aged him overnight. My stomach twisted when I saw him laugh at something Brian said. A sharp, painful twist. Not jealousy exactly, just pure shame, because I was the only person in that house who could see what that laugh actually cost him. Later that same night, I stood in our hallway with all the lights turned off, just the blue glow from our television bouncing faintly down the stairs. Brian had fallen asleep on our couch again, like he did most nights. I stood in the doorway in my bare feet, my robe tied tightly around me, and I waited. Not for anything specific, just for the silence to make some kind of decision for me. But it didn't make any decisions. The silence just got louder and more demanding. I passed Adam once more in our driveway 4 days later. He was carrying a cardboard box full of paint supplies. I was taking our recycling bins to the curb. We didn't touch each other, didn't speak, but our eyes met for just a moment. And I saw it clearly, the same thing I felt every morning since that night in our laundry room. The knowing, the ache, the price we were both paying. This secret isn't going to stay quiet forever. And when it finally explodes into the open, it won't just hurt me. The end began with a question I didn't expect.